Hey, what's going on, everybody? This is Ryan and you're watching Collecting Casually. Now, I'm going to get right down to things. I am so excited to make this video because it's going to highlight the first comic book collection that I bought in 2023. So around the middle of last year, I think it was sometime in June or July, I created a Craigslist ad advertising that I was open to buying comic book collections, as well as things like 80s and 90s toys, pop culture items, Magic the Gathering cards, Dungeons and Dragons, Star Wars, vintage t-shirts, all sorts of things that I'm interested in collecting. And I put that ad out there with a couple pictures saying, hey, you know, I'm looking to buy collections of really any size. Obviously, I'm not buying enormous collections, but I wanted to be able to advertise that I was out there and a local, collector, number one, that was looking to buy collections, not only to add to my personal collection, but to flip and fund the hobby. That's one of those things you always hear is like, help the hobby, help make it pay for itself, right? So whether you're getting a good deal on a book that maybe you're not really interested in, but you can sell it for a higher price at a later date in order to buy books that you actually want for your personal collection. Now, I have had some hits since I put that ad up last summer, but a lot of times they were just tire kickers, or I wasn't really interested in what it was that they had for sale. And I get all sorts of things offered up to me via this ad. We're talking everything from Beanie Babies to Hot Wheels to you name it. I've probably been offered it on this ad. But every now and then I do get a hit on some comics, and I've had offers to buy collections from everything from like Golden Age to modern books. But this was the first hit on the ad that I had in 2023. So the first point of contact I had was this seller sending me a text message with an image saying, hey, I've got a bunch of comic books I'd like to sell. Are you interested? Now, it was pretty vague information that came with that text message. Obviously they mentioned that they had some comic books. They also mentioned magazines like Mad and Cracked, as well as some Disney comic books like Mickey Mouse types of things. So I asked if he had any more pictures of the collection or maybe a list of items that was included in it to see if I was really actually interested in pursuing this offer. He did send another image of the collection, but it was really just the same picture, but at a different angle. So there was really no new information in that image. Thankfully, in the image, which I'm going to show you here, you could see quite a few books that were kind of minor keys that I was actually interested in picking up. And the seller really wanted to meet in person and make sure that I could take a look at the books and all the items to make sure that they were, in a condition that I was willing to purchase, which was nice. He really made it sound like the items were in great condition and that I would be really happy to pick them up because he was like really proud of the items' conditions. And I actually happened to be off of work on the day that he reached out to me, so I was able to meet up with him like an hour later, which was really convenient for the both of us. In our kind of negotiations on location and time and where we were going to meet up, I did make kind of an initial offer based on what I had seen in the picture, but it was also kind of dependent on the condition of the comics and everything else that was included. He said that was fine. Take a look at it. If you don't like it, that's fine. If you need to adjust your price, that's fine as well. So we ended up meeting up that afternoon, and he showed up and opened the back of his car and had just a box of comics and magazines. Now, this wasn't a huge collection, right? The image showed maybe 30 comics or so, along with just a stack of the magazines. You couldn't really tell what was there, but sure enough, he opened up the back of his car, opened up this box, and everything looked to be there. I looked everything over pretty quickly, realized, hey, everything that I saw in the picture looked to be here. I flipped through the magazines just really quick and some of the other items, and decided to make the offer of the full price that we had talked about on the phone. Now, I am going to tell you how much I paid for this collection towards the end of the video, so stick around for that. So I've got a couple clips I'm going to throw in here. This was me like driving to the site and getting ready to meet up with the seller. All right, so I am here in a parking lot waiting to meet up with someone that reached out to me from my Craigslist ad about some comics. They sent me a couple pictures. We did a little negotiating on the phone. Want to see what type of condition they're in. Just waiting for them to show up, and we'll see if we can make a deal. All right, and I've got another clip here of me after the purchase of the comic books. Okay, so just finished up a transaction with this guy. Ended up buying some comics, but also in there were like some Cracked magazines. I think there's a few Mad magazines in there as well. A couple Stanley Presents books. We'll take them back to the house, go through them, and see what we came up with. All right, so now that I have the collection back here at the house, I've gone through it, I rebagged and boarded everything in the collection. So let's go ahead and take a look and see what I got. First up are a couple of these Marvel Comics series books. I got 3 of them in the collection. The first one, and the one that I'm most excited about, is this Doctor Strange Master of the Mystic Arts book. It has multiple reprints of Doctor Strange comics in it. The next one is Conan the Barbarian, volume number 1. It's got a ton of Conan stories in it. And then I got Conan the Barbarian, volume number 2. Again, lots of stories in here, and they're actually full color. They're a little bit smaller, obviously, so you gotta squint a little bit maybe to read these, but these books are all in great shape. I don't collect these, and I don't know that I've ever necessarily seen these before I picked them up in the collection, but I think they're like really good shelf display items, right, for just kind of displaying in your room. If you could see this wall here, tons and tons of toys, comics, memorabilia, all sorts of stuff like that. I think these will go great just as display pieces. Another book in the collection was this Origins of Marvel Comics by Stan Lee. Now this book is pretty beat up, and I actually almost purchased this book at a half-price bookstore a couple months ago. I passed on it, and then I kind of read something that Stan Lee would sometimes sign these, and I went back to that half-price bookstore, didn't find the book, so who knows whether it got sold and if there was ever a signature in it. This one obviously is not signed by Stan Lee. It's pretty beaten up, but it does have some good origin stories. There's a copy of Amazing Fantasy 15 in here, introducing Spider-Man, and there's all sorts of cool stories. Can't wait to take a look at this book. Also included were some non-comic items. These are 2 book and record sets that I was able to pick up. This first one is The Incredible Hulk at Bay. So this is kind of like a read-along record and book that you would get as a kid. So you put the record on, it plays the story, and you kind of follow along in the book. I also got a Fantastic Four book and record set. The Fantastic Four, unfortunately, does not have the album with it, but the Hulk does. Again, just kind of some cool add-in pieces for the collection. Another item was this copy of the Hulk magazine. I have some other issues of this. Again, not something I collect. I'll probably get rid of this at some point, but just another cool add-in for the collection. And then I got 2 large treasury-sized books in the collection as well. The first one is this Batman Limited Collector's Edition. 6 spine-tingling stories here inside. This one's kind of beat up. It's got a lot of creases. It's definitely been read and looked through quite a bit, and at one point was probably trying to be sold at a garage sale or something for 50 cents, as that is written in marker on the cover. There's also a Superman versus Flash treasury-style book that I'm going to add to the collection. Now, these are both DC books. I'm not a big DC person really at all, so I'll probably keep them around for a little while. I have quite a few other treasury books, but most of them, I keep using the word treasury, so obviously I'm a Marvel collector and have Marvel treasury editions. I'll probably end up trying to get rid of these at the next flea market that I attend. All right, with kind of the non-comic items out of the way, we are going to move over to the comic books that were included in this collection. In addition to all the comics and comic related items that I picked up in this collection, there was a stack of probably 30 to 40 Cracked, Super Cracked, Mad Magazine. Let's see here, what else was there? There was some heavy metal magazines, a couple High Times issues in there, and a couple sci-fi magazines. Now those were all things that I factored into the price that I paid for this collection, but not necessarily what I was purchasing on purpose with the collection. Now, I will flip all of those items. I don't collect Cracked. There's a couple issues that I'll collect. Same thing with Mad, if they have maybe a cover that's related to something cool like Star Wars or a comic type event or character, but for the most part I don't collect them. I read some as a kid in the 90s, but most of these are like 70s and 80s books, which kind of ups their value, so I'll be looking to get rid of all of those to kind of recoup some of my costs on this collection in order to buy more. All right, first up are going to be a few DC books that were included in this collection. And the first one is kind of unique. You don't see these all the time, or at least still in their bags, but this is a 2-pack of DC comics, including a Green Lantern and Wonder Woman book. Not something I collect, so this will definitely be an item that'll be up for sale at some point. Again, probably at that flea market later this month. Then there was also a Justice League of America book. All right, and then there was also a Swamp Thing number 3. This is actually the first appearance of Patchwork Man. And then I had a Firestorm, the Nuclear Man number 1. This is actually a first appearance book, but again, another DC title that I'm not going to keep. All right, and then the last DC book that was included in this collection is a pretty major key, but unfortunately the condition is pretty poor. Now, it's not every day that you get a Swamp Thing number 1 in a collection, and I didn't actually see this book in the initial picture that the seller sent to me. It was actually hiding kind of behind some other books, and you could see the whole like top title section here, but I kind of just looked right past it. I didn't even realize that it was, oh, the actual purple, you know, from the number 1 on the cover. But when I saw it, when I was looking through the books with the seller, I was like, oh, okay, this was not necessarily factored into the offer that I gave him. But at the same time, this book is not in great condition. It's definitely, I mean, it's a mid-grade copy, but it does have a couple examples of tape pulls on the front, and it has some damage on the back of the book as well. Multiple color-breaking spine ticks and a few creases here and there. So, while I wasn't expecting this in the collection, I was really happy it was there, and I'm happy to add it to my PC. Now, there is a little bit of an extra story to go along with this book, which I'll cover here in just a bit. All right, moving over to the Marvel titles, I actually had 2 copies of Machine Man. This is the first solo series for Machine Man and Machine Man's introduction into Marvel continuity. All right, next up is Black Panther number 15. This is actually the last book in the first volume of this series. All right, another minor key that we picked up was Micronauts number 8. This is actually the first appearance of Captain Universe. Now, one thing I will say is that the seller was pretty accurate on their condition description of these books. They didn't say they were, you know, near mint or would grade at a 9.8 or anything like that, but they said they were in good condition, and I do believe that to be the case. You know, I've looked these books over pretty closely. I'm actually looking to send a couple in to be cleaned, pressed, and graded. So I was pretty happy with their description of these books, which is really nice. A lot of times you'll get sellers that say, oh, these are in mint condition, and you go to take a look at the books and you're like, I don't know what your description or definition of mint is, but this is not it. You know, you'll end up with books that have a ton of spine ticks, creases, pieces missing off of the cover, stains, all sorts of things. This is one of those times where their description was actually pretty accurate. All right, the first of multiple X-Men books is X-Men number 118. This is actually the first appearance of Mariko Yoshida, who was Wolverine's now dead fiance, our first introduction to her. All right, the next X-Men book is number 124, and we have Proletarian here, really taking control of Cyclops and Storm. And then there were 2 copies of X-Men 125. This is actually the first cameo appearance of Mutant X. Okay, now I've had a couple minor keys here and there, but now we're getting into what I consider the cooler books. Still really minor keys, but pretty excited to add these to my collection. The first one, though, is What If number 1, and it's Spider-Man joined Fantastic Four. Now, obviously, the What If series has been pretty popular, right? We've had a Disney Plus series about What If, all sorts of great stories in the What If series, and super excited to add number 1 to my collection. Next really cool book that was in this collection is Invincible Iron Man number 2. Now this book would be really, really exciting if it didn't have this really large tape pull across nearly the whole front of the cover. If it didn't have that tape pull, this would definitely be a mid-grade copy of the book. I was really disappointed to see that tape pull in person, but otherwise this is a really great copy of the second book in the Invincible Iron Man series. Really cool cover here. Love the artwork. The colors really pop on this copy as well, so just really disappointing to see that tape pull. All right, now these next two books are definitely my favorites out of this collection, and the first one is Devil Dinosaur #1. This is a newsstand like most of these books were, and this is in really, really great condition. I'm looking to get it cleaned and pressed. Not that it needs much of a cleaning and really not much of a press, but I just want to make sure that it gets the best grade as possible before I submit this in for grading. I've had this on my want list for a while. I've seen it available a couple times here and there at shops and shows around the area, but I ended up, buying other books. This wasn't like #1 on my want list or anything like that, but it was definitely on there, and since it was included in this collection, it just made sense to make it part of the offer and take it into higher consideration when figuring out what the price was that I wanted to pay for this collection. Super excited to add this to my collection. And probably the favorite book that was in the collection is X-Men #130. This is the first appearance of Dazzler. Now, I do already have one or maybe even two copies of this book, but this one is the cleanest and best condition book that I have. Again, this is another newsstand that I will be looking to have sent off to be cleaned, pressed, and graded. It is just really, really clean, in my opinion, doesn't need much work at all, and it will be one that I'm really excited to see come back with hopefully a really high grade. So I was really excited to have bought this collection for the price that I did. Now, shoot to 2 days after the purchase, and I get a message from the seller saying, "Hey, thanks for buying them, but I made a mistake and included a comic in there that wasn't supposed to be sold." Now, this collection had come from, what he said was, an uncle that had passed away that lived out of state, and he was given these comics as part of the emptying of that estate. Whether that's the case or not, I'm not sure, but that was what he said. And he said, "Hey, I really wasn't supposed to sell this, or didn't want to sell this one comic. I'm gonna need it back." Now, out of all this collection, I wasn't sure what that was going to be. It ended up being the Swamp Thing #1. Now, that really wouldn't be that big of a deal, but he said, "Hey, I really need that back. It's worth a lot of money. I'm going to need it back, or I'm going to need $500 from you, and you can keep the comic." Now, I was a little taken back by this, #1, because Swamp Thing #1, even in great condition, is not a $500 comic. Now, we're here at the beginning of February of 2023, and some news just came out regarding Swamp Thing, so that price actually may start shooting up. So it might actually be closer to a $500 book in maybe 9.8 grade. But this book is definitely not in that condition. This is low to mid grade at best. And on the cover there, there's some tape pulls, and I indicated that to the seller once I got back a hold of him. I said, "Hey, I'm happy to get this book back to you. It's definitely not worth $500. I'm not sure where he came up with that figure, but hey, you know what? I'll work with you to get it back to you, and maybe we can work something out where, I get some of my funds back." Or he mentioned he had some more comics that he might be able to find, and maybe we can work a deal out that way, because I didn't feel like it would be fair for me to give this book back, since I had based my offer and paid him based on the books that were included in this collection. And he seemed to be pretty open to that idea. So, I said, "Hey, I'll throw the book in my car and I'll bring it to work with me tomorrow. Maybe we can meet up over my lunch break or at the end of the day." He said, "Great, that sounds good. Just reach out to me tomorrow and we'll see when we can meet up." Well, over the next 2 to 3 days, I tried multiple times to meet up with this seller, and it never seemed like it was a good time for them. I was willing to, push my lunch break an hour forward, an hour back, meet him right after work at a couple locations. It just never seemed to work out. And he was actually getting ready to go away out of town for about a week at the end of the weekend. And he said, "Hey, I'll just get with you when I get back." Cue a week and a half later, he reaches out to me and says, "Hey, never mind, no big deal. You can keep the book. Thanks for trying to work with me." So I don't know what turned out, with him not wanting that book anymore, but I do still obviously have the Swamp Thing #1, and I'm going to keep it in my personal collection. I just thought that was kind of a really weird turn of events. It's not that weird of a thing, I guess, buyer's or seller's remorse. I've had buyer's and seller's remorse in the past, not necessarily related to comic books, but in other purchases. But I don't know that I've ever asked for my money back or to buy something back from whoever I had a transaction with. I'd be curious to know though, have you ever interacted with anybody, especially related to comics, where they maybe sold you a book that they didn't want to and asked for it back, or you sold something that you wish you wouldn't have? Have you asked for it back, you know, in exchange for money? I'm curious if that happens very often. All right, this is currently editing the video, Ryan, and I just realized I forgot to record what I paid for this collection. All right, so what did I pay for this collection in total? I paid $250. Now, I based my price on the books that I could see in the picture. So that's like the X-Men 130, that's the first appearance of Dazzler, the Devil Dinosaur #1, the Incredible Iron Man #2, and then all of the other books kind of added in there as extras. But that also includes that whole stack of like 30 or 40 Cracked and Mad magazines that I'm going to be able to sell to kind of recoup some of that cost. You know, there's also those books that came with it. There's the extra magazines, the records, just some of the miscellaneous items that kind of add to the value of this collection. Most of the X-Men titles I'm going to be adding to my personal collection. I already have some of them, so others I'm going to end up selling at some point to, again, recoup some of that money from the collection. But I feel like $250 was a pretty fair price for the size of this collection. It was honestly pretty small. There were a lot more magazines than there were comics in this collection, so I was really paying almost individual prices on these books, but I feel like it was a pretty fair deal, and I'm going to be able to make my money back at the very minimum. Now, the seller has reached out to me again in the last couple of days, offering up another load of comics. He sent me a couple pictures of them, and it wasn't really anything I was really interested in. There were definitely not any keys in the books that he was offering up, and I have a feeling he was going to want more than I wanted to pay for those comics. Really, they were just run fillers of titles that I don't necessarily collect. You know, Fantastic Four, there were some Iron Man and other Marvel titles that I could probably end up flipping, but it just didn't feel like the right time, and I'm not sure that I actually want to make another purchase from this seller just based on the kind of issues I had in communication and related to the request to have Swamp Thing back. I think I'm just probably done with the seller in general. All right, well, there it is. That was the first collection I purchased in 2023. And believe it or not, I've actually purchased another collection since this one, and I'm gonna be working on that video very soon. This second collection I purchased had over 400 comics in it, and there were some hidden keys in there that I did not see when I was looking through the comics at the point of purchase with this seller. So I was really excited going through that collection. I'm really excited to show everybody that collection and make a video for it. So stay tuned to the channel if you want to see that. And to make sure that you do get to see that video, make sure to give me a subscribe so that you are notified right away when that video does go live. And if you like this video, give it a thumbs up. Now, definitely leave me a comment below, you know, related to comic collections that you've picked up maybe this year, or maybe you've had buyer's remorse or seller's remorse in the past. I want to hear about it. Leave me a comment below, and we'll catch you in the next video.